which being interpreted is to say, the sound of the shofar heralds the coming of the Mashiach, the anointing of a king. It was at the time that Yeshua was born in Bethlehem, and it's to say, let's pay attention. And so with these two shofars in this shape, and the third one, Dave, if you want to hold it up there again, just for the sake of explanation. It's basically the shape of the modern letter Shin, which is, you might say, the monogram of El Shaddai, the Almighty. And it's the Hebrew letter, which is typically written on mezuzahs, which means doorpost, which in the mezuzah that typically those of the tribe of Brother Yehuda has the Shema written, which is to say, have these words written on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, in a nutshell. So, thank you. What this is about is to explain the chart. So, I was asked to make it very simple. So, what we just did with the shofar is the 30-second explanation of what this chart is. It's as simple as I can get. It's to simply say, here's something to look at and pay attention to. Here's the next version. It is written, Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Ve'ahavta et Yahweh Eloheinu, ve'kol lavevka, uve'kol nafsheka, uve'kol meodaka. Which being interpreted is to say, hear, believe, and do. Listen up, Israel. Yahweh, our Elohim, our mighty one. Yahweh is Echad, which is to say first, primary, united, singular. And you shall love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your, and the word best is translated very. It's not just strength, it's your, and it's the root of the same word for forever and ever, leolam va'ed. And the word ed, meaning ever, is a witness and a testimony. So it's with all your, everything you can express. That's the word. It's not just strength. So in the New Testament, there's actually 4 things: with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But this is with all your heart, with all your nephesh, which is your inner breath, your being, and then your very. So that's the 1-minute explanation of what this chart is about. What are we supposed to hear? What are we supposed to believe? What are we supposed to do? Well, that's what the chart explains and what the chart answers. So the purpose of this chart is simply to respond to the primary instruction. Yeshua was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And this is what he said. He said the Shema, and the to love Yahweh your Elohim. And he also said you should love your neighbor as yourself. And so it's like, well, how does that fit in? That's part of the puzzle, but simply that is what this chart is saying. So if there's any mystery about what's all this stuff on this chart, it's an explanation of the Shema and the Great Commandment. Selah. Think about that. The word Selah actually is used quite often in the Psalms. It's, I believe it's a Psalmic Lamed Hey, and it actually means a suspension in the music. And it also is a picture when the people of Israel were taken into captivity, specifically the southern kingdom of Judah were whisked off by Babylon and Babylonian armies and taken back to the land of the Babylon. They took their harps and they threw them up into the trees. And then their captors would say, hey, play some music for us. Sing us your songs of how great your temple was and your deity and the wonderful life you had. They said, how can we sing those songs when our city is in ruins and our people have been pillaged and ravaged? But to throw their harps up in the trees is actually a picture of the word Selah. It's a suspension of music. It's like, and it literally means basically stop and think about it. So in between the breaks here, we'll occasionally pause to stop and think about it. So I'm going to tell you what I'm telling you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you here. So the Sheen is a symbol of El Shaddai, the Almighty. Regard him, the shofars. His voice like a trumpet on Mount Sinai, the day that the Ten Commandments, the Debarim, the words, the matters, the things, is the word Debarim. The days that those were given to the people of all of Israel, the congregation of all the tribes, after they came out of Egypt. Book of the Exodus. There was a sound of the shofar getting louder and louder and louder till the people were quaking, thinking that they would be destroyed. And it's like the Almighty is speaking to you. And they even said, boy, has there ever been such a time when a human has encountered the Almighty and yet lived? And it's like, but if he speaks again, we're going to die. And it's like, if he speaks again, let us hear. Let us hear the next time he speaks. This time, hopefully, he's speaking. We want to hear his words. Do not harden your hearts like our forefathers did before us. There's something going on these days. We just went to Israel because, and this is a bigger part of the explanation, there seems to be the evidence of a curse that the Almighty put on his people. For the northern kingdom of Israel, according to Ezekiel chapter 4, it was 390 days that he laid on his side, a day for a year, 390 years, and according to Leviticus 26, the curse, the punishment, was multiplied 7 times. 7 times 390 is 2,730. The northern kingdom of Israel was taken into captivity 721 BC by Assyria. About 130 years later or so, Judah, the southern kingdom, Yehudah, was taken into captivity into Babylon. That's a different event. They came back after 70 years when Daniel, calculated in the numbers, prayed and said, hey, Yahweh, according to your contract, you said after 70 years we could go back home and get free from this prison. Under Cyrus, they were set free and came back to Jerusalem. But that didn't address the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes. They never did come back. They've been wayward ever since. But the curse to them, remember, for Judah, Yehudah, it was 70 years, but for, according to Jeremiah, according to Ezekiel, it was 40, but there was something else going on there. But anyway, according to Ezekiel chapter 4, the northern kingdom had 390 times 7, 2,730. Assyria came in and conquered Samaria in 721. If you look at the calendar, you go 1 BC, there was no year 0, then it's 1 AD. So you've got a 1-year gap there. But if you take 721, add 2,730 years, it comes out to 2010. That's this year, 2010. So we went to Israel at Sukkot, which is the festival of the ingathering harvest. And we went to Shiloh, the place where the Mishkan, the tabernacle, stood for 369 years, I believe it was. And even though it was, Yahweh said, Ichabod, the glory has departed from this place, we went to the place where the Mishkan stood, and we stood at the place of the altar of incense, which represents the prayers of the saints, and 4 of us from the scattered tribes, dispersed across the face of the earth, stood there and prayed for the northern kingdom, the house of Ephraim, the same basic type of prayer. We didn't quote it, but from Daniel's heart he prayed. From our hearts we beseeched Yahweh Eloheinu, our Elohim, to end the curse, to set us free from the bondage of the tyrannical despots that oppress us, because we and our forefathers have profaned the covenant and walked away from his ways. And we asked him to let us come back home. That's what this is about. So that there's the 5-minute version of what this chart's about. Okay, so the purpose of this chart is to give us a method of doing what Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, our Elohim, the creator of heaven and earth, asked his people to do, commanded them to do, prescribed for them to do, to walk in his ways. The word for the way or the path is actually derek, which is Dalet Resh Kaf. We'll get into the words and letters in a few minutes, but just so you become familiar. So to walk in his ways is to halakha, which is the way you walk on the derek. The word derek also means a journey and a path and a wayfarer and a sojourner and one who embarks on a mission. So To describe the format of the chart, for the record, let me pause for a moment with this specific chart and say this. Previously, and with the chart, we've given people 2 sets of DVDs. One was recorded in 2006, one was in 2009. It was about this information. This chart is the attempt to clarify and simplify the information on those 2 sets of DVDs, both of which cover the same material 3 years apart. But the information on this chart was in reference to them. They are not explaining the chart. The purpose of today is to explain the chart. So those of you who have seen those DVDs, each one of them are about 7 or 8 hours. It's explaining the meanings of the letters and how the meanings of the letters are keyed to a code that's embedded in the pattern of the Mishkan, which in English is the tabernacle, which is the same pattern as the 7 days of creation listed in Genesis chapter 1, the book of Bereshit, and is the same pattern as the 7 festivals of Yahweh listed in chapter 23 of Leviticus. So those 2 sets of DVDs are the same information explaining the synchronicity, you might say, the similarity like this, where the 7 days of creation, the 7 festivals, and the Mishkan pattern are all the same pattern of Yahweh's design, and it happens to be the same pattern as the Aleph Bet. So I'm not going to try to address here that same information because it'll take another 7 or 8 hours. What I'm going to try to do is show you how the chart is laid out as a way of rendering that same information pictographically on this chart rather than the verbal 7 or 8 hour oration of those DVDs. And for what it's worth, there's this one other chart which nobody's seen this one until this particular meeting. And unfortunately, we could only print them up on these little Xerox copies. They could be, this is printed on a glossy, it's a little better, easier to read. But what this is to say, the reason for this filming is because that big chart that we're going to discuss seemed too complicated, even though it's a simplification of the 14 hours of DVDs. This chart is a simplification of the information on that chart. Being simplified, it's missing a few things. But what this is that each letter, there's no particular reason why some things are on this side and some things are on that side. It's by the colors, which happens to match the colors of the alphabet here. You know, Aleph is white, Bet is blue, Gimel is purple, Dalet red, Hey orange. It's the same layout, which is the same layout across here. Just so you know, things are trying to be mapped together. But as you read each color, it tells you basically, essentially, what each letter is all about. Now you can basically get the same information going back to the chart. If you want to see what the letter Shin, for example, means, you could start up here and read it all the way down to here in the orange column, and you'll get the essence of sheenness. So there was a question here earlier, what is the word Sephirotic? Is that English? Is that Hebrew? It's kind of Heblish. It's a blend of Hebrew and English. The word Sepher, or Sephirot, being the plural of Sepher, is Hebrew, and it basically, this space right here is the word Sepher on the chart, and I'm referencing the chart, so if anybody has the chart, they know where to look. Why is this here? The word Sepher is the word for book, but it also means count, number, tell, narrate, to cut shape, a letter, a document, a book, a writing, enumeration, census, offense, a figure, cipher, literate. There's other meanings there. Abraham was told to sepher the stars. So we think, oh, he was told to count the stars because the meaning for sepher is count. But it also means to describe something as a picture, like telling a story. If somebody says, well, here's my property, you go, where is it? Well, you put in fence posts, and then you string a line between the fence posts. It's like putting down dots and then putting lines between the dots and forming a picture. You're sephering. You're connecting the dots. Well, as a little kid, you do that when you're learning how to draw. Well, I believe that Abraham was told to sephir the stars, not just count them, which nobody can do, there's too many of them, but he was told to, as it were, make pictures out of the stars, tell a story by connecting the dots. It's like, hey, that's kind of what the constellations are. So there, if you know the Hebrew word, essentially, Abraham himself was commanded to draw the constellations. And interestingly enough, Abraham lived approximately 2000 BC, and the oldest planetarium, you might say, on record is from Dendera, Egypt, which is about 2000 BC. And it had Egyptian figures. Well, now, why would the Egyptians have figures if Abraham made this up? Let's see, Abraham went to Egypt twice, and Joseph, Abraham's, great-grandson, was the prime minister, actually the vizier of Egypt for quite some time. And Joseph is the one who had the dream of the stars and the moon and the sun bowing down to him. Would it have been too far of a stretch to think that Joseph, being seen as fully Egyptian at one point, not a Hebrew but an Egyptian, had the name of Zaphnath-Paneah, which means the one who can see the mysteries, who the face of the mysteries are revealed to him. And it's like, would he not have perhaps designed this planetarium approximately 2000 BC? Could have been. But the word for sephir is also book. So the book of the Torah is called Sefer Torah. So to have this in here tells you why that's there. The other reason why the word right above it is there is the word bean. Interestingly enough, when people wear a cap with a propeller on top, we think, haha, that's a little thing you give to kids. It's called a beanie. But the word bean in Hebrew, Strong's number 996, just simply means between. But Strong's number 995, spelled the same way, bet yod nun, means, and here's the dictionary definition, to view, regard, know, to interpolate, between, among, during, to separate, divide, distinguish, clear, evident, perceive, to become wise, understood, explained, instructed, comprehension, discern, to look well to, be prudent, to think, and have intelligence. That's what this chart is about. This chart is about being able to bean the sephir, which is where we get the word cipher, connecting the dots. The purpose of this chart is to enable you to cipher the sephir and use your beanie. Get the propeller going. Get that thing spinning. Think. Now, as a disclaimer, I was told by a couple of people who claim to be prophetic that to think is carnal. And so therefore, step back from the thinking. Step back from the beanie. It's like, is that true? Every time you see the word bean in the scriptures, it's actually telling us to think. Is that carnal? Now, I could say, well, you know, I'm a human being. I have carnality. I have flesh. In Spanish, the word carne means meat. Okay, I have flesh. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to think. I'm supposed to use my brain. The Creator designed the brain, the functions of the physicality of it, and said, here, go ahead and use it. Think. It's like, okay, so is that carnal? Sure, I guess it is. It's the human condition to use the tissues in your skull to process thinking. I guess that's carnal. But that's not the way they meant it, but that's the way I'm taking it. As a matter of fact, I told them for the record, I said, if what you're telling me is not to think, then the conversation's over and you might leave. It's like there's nothing more to talk about. Anyway, what I'm going to do here is explain the different pieces of the chart, and this is the kind of the 1 hour version of what this chart is about. So to go back to this, I'm relating this to this. If you read each one of these letters, it's a synthesis, a synopsis of each one of these written all the way down. These are general random meanings of each letter. Each thing on this chart is very specific. This word is in this space for a reason, and it wouldn't fit down here. Everything here is very, very specific. This is just general information. So if you read this, you'll get a feeling of what each letter means. So this is trying to make that easier. So this is kind of like, well, if you can read through this and understand this, it'll kind of, it's like the appetizer for the chart. you might say. I'm going to show you one other thing, which no one has actually seen this. This is a future project. One of the reasons why we're doing this, and I apologize for having to, say things that cost money, but the reason for that is that there's hundreds of dollars worth of printing time. A lady up in Oregon City sitting at the computer and printing these things out on paper. I mean, we've spent thousands of dollars. So to charge a little bit for these things is simply to put it back into the process of funding the next step. That poster had thousands of dollars put into it. And even this chart costs a couple hundred. This is the next thing. It's the same format, but what I found was that if you look at the natural sequence of the letters in the alphabetic chronology, right? The word in English, AB, or then you look at BC, and then you look at CD, then you look at DE. Well, those don't spell words. They don't mean anything. But in Hebrew, that's not so. Every pair of letters, every two letters means something. And so Aleph Bet, for example, means father. But it's not just father, it's pronounced Abba, but it's also the prime factor, the origin, the source, the initial matter, that which starts everything off. That's what Aleph Bet as a word means. But then Bet Gimel is a word. Gimel Dalet is a word. Dalet Hey, so forth and so forth, all the way through to the end of the alphabet. And then you look at the three-letter groups. Aleph Bet Gimel. Bet Gimel Dalet. Gimel Dalet Hey. That's what this is a chart of. And so the top half of this is every two-letter sequence and every three-letter sequence running front to back that way. And then the bottom half is every two-letter and three-letter sequence running backwards, starting with Tav Shin Resh, Shin Resh Kuf, Kuf Zadi Pei. And so we can see the natural meanings embedded in the alphabet by their natural chronology without even trying, without manipulating anything, without reading and inferring into anything. That's just what it says. And so as you look at this, you can see that the beginning of the alphabet has certain concepts of like initiating something and then developing it and unfolding, and then the resolution of gathering it all up and concluding it. That's just in the natural sequence of the letters. So this is the next chart to be made. I have the lady now in executive copy and print in Oregon City sitting there entering this into this week. She's working on this. This could take a little bit of time, but just so you know where this is headed. One more thing to tell you where this is headed as a concept, and I'm telling you this to say this isn't just where we're at, this is where we're projected. And to have something in the future that you look forward to is actually one of the pieces embedded in this chart. It's the picture of the Zadi. So as a reference to the chart, the letter Zadi here in the blue, which is the Ark of the Covenant, which lines up with the Sabbath day, is essentially a picture of the hope set before you. So as you go through your week, you're looking at, the day of rest is coming. As you go through your life, you go, the eternal kingdom is coming. The day of our reward is out there. It gives you that projection. We were told that if we walk in the ways of the Torah, following in the path of the footsteps of Yeshua, keeping the commandments of Yahweh, that we will be conformed to His image. It's like you're being put on a conveyor belt and you're just being moved along to that ultimate destination. And the destination is we will all be conformed to His image, yet as our individual personalities in His image. That's the hope set before us. It's the picture of does the caterpillar know he's going to become a butterfly? Maybe he doesn't. But we were given that hope and that expectation, that though we're earthbound, walking along eating lettuce, as it were, eating leaves, when you see this butterfly flying, drinking nectar with these beautiful wings, it's like that is a picture, the caterpillar type, the butterfly type. And if you look at the chart, under Vav, it says Ben Yosef, and it actually says caterpillar type. And at the Resh, it says Ben David and the butterfly type. And right here, there's an explanation of what that refers to, because that's kind of this one little embedded thing. it says, son of Yosef. Well, Ben Yosef, this word right here, even though it's written in Hebrew, the word Ben means son. And what does Yosef mean? Well, that's Joseph. That's the guy who was a vizier of Egypt. So wait a minute, there's something in the name. What does his name mean? Here's the definition of what the word Yosef means. It means inquire, goblet, threshold, mediator, broker of food, and he will accumulate. Now think about this. Yosef, given the Egyptian name of Zaphnath Paneach, the word Zephan, like Zephaniah or Zephaniah in English, Zephan means north, but it also means the hidden place. The word Zephan means hidden. So Zephaniah means the hidden secrets of Yahweh. And for Joseph to say his name means broker of food, he will accumulate to inquire, and goblet. A goblet is something where it accumulates, right? You pour liquids into a goblet. A threshold and a broker of food is what he was doing. But that's the meaning of the word Joseph. So as he was sitting there on his throne, in his office chair, you might say, and his brothers come in, and he's known as, oh, this guy's the broker of food. You have to cross his threshold to inquire of him, and he's sitting there holding a goblet and says, don't you know by this I divine? And you guys stole it. Of course, he planted it, but they stole it and he put it in Benjamin's bag. He was saying, Joseph, 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 Joseph. If you can read the symbols, he's Joseph means threshold. He will accumulate, broker of food, inquire, goblet. But they were like, oh gosh, that's Panea. You know, it's like they couldn't read Joseph. My point is, the mysteries of Yahweh are in the Hebrew. If we can read the Hebrew, we can see Yahweh's mysteries. That's what this chart is for, to help you see the mysteries that have been hidden, revealing Yahweh's plan and face and the hope set before us. There's a couple things in Psalm 119 that I just saw this weekend we'll talk about in a little bit, which is just incredible, if we can see it. Anyway, Ben David. Ben means son. Dawid. What does Dawid mean? It says right here, son of David. David means beloved. But also, if you say, okay, well, David means beloved, it's where we get dude. Hey, dude. Dalet, vav, dalet, dude. But it's also, dalet is a door. Vav is that thing which is hooked onto the door that hooks things together. How do you engage the door? Through the door handle. So the door handle of the door is kind of like the yud of the dalet. Dalet meaning door, yud meaning hand or the graspable part. So David is kind of like the door handle. So the son of the door handle, what does that mean? But see, now we have to get out of direct English words and go into concepts. All this Hebrew is pictures, concepts. And so I'm trying to show you that when you read these Hebrew words, you're not just, where's the dictionary? Oh, that's what it means. Okay, that's what it says. Where's Strong's Concordance? Oh, that's the word. Okay, that's what it's pictures. You got to embellish. And sometimes you take a verse and you write down all the words, and they're like pictures. And it's like now you have to sefer the words, connect the dots between the words. We have been taught to read the words in sequence, and because it doesn't make sense in English, we add prepositions of, the, and, he said, and that means, and we play. It's like in Hebrew, they don't really have those. They kind of do, like the mem in front of a word can mean of, and a bet in front of a word as a prefix can mean in or through, but sometimes the words are just like bullet points. And you have to string them together. And so you have to stop and bean. You have to think and ponder and meditate. What's he trying to say? How do I blend these words together? And sometimes you have to do that with the letters that spell a word. Bet, yod, nun, bean. Well, you could say, okay, I'm just going to remember that bean is to interpolate or put together. And it's like, but what is bet, yod, nun? Now you break it down, you crumble it down to its smallest integral parts. Bet is a body, it's a container. It means, if you read in the blue section and you read all the way down, you'll get a feeling for, here's a Hebrewish word, betness. Bet is the Hebrew letter, and the betness is to put an English suffix on it and say that you'll get the essence of what it means to be bet. if you read this entire blue column, and then, if you want, you can come over to this chart, and you can read this, and you'll say, okay, do you get a feeling for what bet means? Okay, do the same thing for the letter Yud, which is in the blue. Read over there. And so you say, well, Yud can mean my or me, so bet Yod means in me. And then the letter Nun means to basically engaged in the active of doing something, or to be imparted. When you plug something in to the wall to get electricity so then you can use it, you're nooning the tool. You're plugging it in so it's imparted the electricity that it takes. So bet Yod Nun, which means in me, now go to take action. Or with me, or through me, or who's me? Well, Yod is the hand of the Creator. So the Creator is saying, plug into me and start using the body that I gave you. Put your hand to the task, or put your mind to the task. Because Bet Yod Nun is actually where we get the word bone, Bet Vav Nun, which has to do with a building, or we get literally bones, which is the structure of the body. And so Bet Nun He has to do with building, or the way that the established structure gets its shape. And if you bean what the Bonah is, Bet also having to do with the materialized physical universe that the Aleph, the architect author, thought about, planned. So here you have this picture of kind of like this vortex spiral. What that's trying to say in a picture form, because everything in these columns right here, these rows here, is a simple sketch of a picture embodying the essence, or one of the basic essences of each letter. So that you can not only think in words, this is what the letters mean, but here's a picture giving you a feeling of what it means. So you have the whole right brain, left brain ability to render each letter here, which is why I did that. But the point is about the spiral is to say the word Ein Sof, and that's also, well, I'm not sure where it is offhand. It's over there. Anyway, the point is, when you see the word Ein Sof, the word Ein, pronounced Ein, but spelled in English the way you'd read it, would be A-I-N. Well, we also have a slang English word which means ain't, which says ain't, which means there's nothing there. It's without. Well, that's what the word ein means in Hebrew. It means without. The word sof is a limitation. Now, sof is similar to sefer, which is samik vav pei, but sefer is samik pei resh. Sefer is the cipher, which is to say, put a limit. Establish a fence line on your border of your property. This is how far it goes. So to sefer, connecting dots, saying, here's a limit. But the ein sof, see the related words, is without limit. The unlimited one is the Ein Sof, which is, when we say in English, you might say God the Father. Well, who's he? Well, he's the guy that's so huge, so vast, so eternally endless, he can't even be defined. In fact, you can't even say the words God the Father and think you're referring to the unlimited guy because you just put a limit on him. Now it becomes this philosophical conundrum. How do you get out of that philosophical conundrum of describing the indescribable? As soon as you try to describe it, it's a limit. That's what this chart is about. That's exactly what this chart is about. The unlimited one himself decided the limit by which he will be referenced. In other words, he gave himself a limitation that we could grab hold of and say, this is who I'm talking about. But then it's kind of like an oxymoron. It's mutually exclusive. It's to say, how could the unlimited one give himself a limit? He's no longer unlimited. Now he's giving us a limit. That's what Yod He Vav He is. Moshe said to the voice speaking through the burning bush, who shall I say sent me? I'm talking to you. Who are you? That I should take a limit, a handle, a name, and go back and give it to the leaders of Israel and say, I was talking to this guy. I can't say, I was talking to the one who has no name. I was talking to the one who is so big you can't say who he is. You can say, who? So the guy said, the voice said, Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. What does that mean? Well, you could say, well, translate it means I am that I am, or I will be what I will be, but that's not really what it says. He said, Aleph He Yod He. You'd say, well, what is that translated? I am or I will be? That's not what he said. And I'm saying that for a reason. When you render it in English, you lost it. What you've got is a few crumbs, and it's like, yeah, but where's the cake? All I have is a few crumbs. He said Aleph He Yod He, Aleph Shin Resh, Aleph He Yod He. Well, what's an Aleph? Go back and you read all this, and you'll get the feeling of Alephness, and then He-ness, and then Yod, and then He. What does that mean? Well, Aleph, generally speaking, if you go back on this other chart, you'll get the feeling. It's the one who planned and purposed everything. So out of all possible things, remember, he's endless. He's without limit. So here's the picture of the spiral. Out of all the possible, like this huge spiral like 1,000,000 miles away. It's bigger than the universe, because the universe is a contained limit. Even though we say, well, the universe is eternal, it's infinite. It's like, but even in its infiniteness, it's a limitation compared to the Ein Sof. So out of all that, he thinks, he considers, he uses his own being processes to say, this is what it'll be right here. And this is what I will now express myself as. So the Aleph, the one who considered everything, and He means to reveal or express, and expressed it in and as Yod, the creator, or that which is created, because the Yod is the hand that works, that he would reveal himself, He, through the Yod. So Aleph He Yod He says the one who planned the whole thing, determined to reveal himself in and through the creator of this place. That's Aleph He Yod He. It's translated, I am or I will be. I'll be whatever I'll be. I am that I am. You can't put a limit on me, but tell you what, you can, from this point on, simply refer to me as the creator of the heavens and the earth. Everything you see, I determined it, I designed it, I purposed it, intended it, set it in motion to accomplish what I made it to do. And those are all the meanings, what I just spoke, Aleph He Yod He. And if you see these letters, you can figure that out too for yourself. I'm not so smart, I'm just telling you what the letters are saying. You are equally capable to read these letters and come up to that same conclusion. So the purpose of this is to say, if we see what he said, if we see what he said, hear what he said, he spoke, and then he wrote with his finger on the tables of stone. What language did he speak? Would have been Hebrew. He was speaking to the Hebrews. He pulled them out of Egypt, wanted to get them away from their deities, away from their culture, and gave them his explanation of himself. And then he wrote it with his finger. So what are these 22 letters? These 22 letters, I believe, is what he came up with as the mechanism to explain himself. The Ein Sof has now decided to reveal himself in reference of these 22 letters, of which He, Aleph, and Yod, the three letters of Aleph He Yod He, and of Yod He Vav He, those are only three letters too. Those are only three of the 22, but he gave us all 22. He determined to express himself, reveal his face, reveal his character and nature, and make everything that exists in heaven and earth simply by the mechanism of what these 22 letters mean. So to understand the meaning of these 22 letters is to understand and comprehend in a pictographic form what the Creator, the Ein Sof, determined to be his own limit. In other words, the one without limit says, I will give myself this limitation, and then I'm going to create your brain, your being, to be the container, the bed is the container, the goblet is the container. You are the container designed specifically to hold that information that he chose to reveal himself as. So we are pre-programmed, we're pre-wired, we're manufactured, designed to fit the information that he was then going to give. You have a three-pronged plug and a three-hole in the wall. It's designed to plug in. And if you know about electrical, if you're running a different amperage or different voltage, you'll have a different design of a plug-hole configuration. He designed us to be the exact configuration of the receptacle for his prongs to plug into and make the link of communication. And that's the meaning of Aleph and Bet. Bet is the receptacle, Aleph is the I will. Aleph is the prong to saying, I will engage, and Aleph is, or Bet is, in me. Bet Yod means in me. It's like, here, in me. Where do I plug this in? Oh, the receptacle is crying, in me. What does a house say? If it's a welcoming house, it's welcome in. Come on in. The letter Bet is a house. It's a body, and it basically says, come on in. You're welcome. And what is it in the Christian mindset? What do you do when you finally realize that you're lost and you need to be saved, found? Jesus, come in to my heart. It's the same picture, but you'll never read the Old Testament and see anywhere where anybody was told they're supposed to ask Jesus in their heart in order to be saved and go to heaven. You'll never see it, but it's right there, the letters Aleph and Bet, which is the expression of the Father, Abba. And he constantly rebuked Israel for being hard-hearted, wandering away and rejecting him instead of welcoming him and his matters, his stuff, his debarim, his mitzvot. All these words sound foreign, but if we went through and looked at each word, you'll see what they mean. Okay. What I'm going to do now is to show you how the chart is laid out briefly, not much detail, but so this strange structure in the organization of the chart can make sense. So I'll go over here and reference this. Very top is the English letters, which are rendered by actual chronological position, which is the ordinal sequence, you might say, as well as the phonetic. So, for example, and I'm not going to go through every detail. There's so many spaces here. If I explained every space, it would just take way too many hours. So I'm going to show you, in 20 minutes here, a general overview of the way the chart's laid out. So at least when you're looking at this, you're not going like, why these stripes? Why is it shaped like this? Okay, at the top is the English letter. So for example, the Tav is actually the T sound, but so is also the Tet, and it's pronounced as either a T or a TH, but I believe it's the Ashkenazi way of pronouncing a Tav is actually as an S. So you'll have, instead of Shabbat, you'll say Shavas, or Bes, B-E-I-S, meaning house, instead of Bet. It's just two different linguistic cultures, you might say. But it's essentially a T or a TH. Sheen can be an S or an SH. Resh is R, Kuf is Q, not to be mistaken with Kaf, which is a K. Our letter C is actually the letter G for Gimel. But in the Greek, they picked up, if we look at the alphabetic sequence, Aleph lines up with A, Bet with B. It's actually pronounced as a V also, which is the same in Spanish. It can be a B or a V. Anyway, the letter G, you'll notice that this is a Greek line, and our lowercase letter G looks just like the Greek Zeta, which is in the position of the Zion, which is the letter right before the Het, which is the position of our letter G. So if you look close here, you'll realize how the languages started swirling and blending and kind of getting confused a little bit. But they all came out of Hebrew. But to make a clarification, some people don't know this is Hebrew. Historically, this letter style, which is in these red letters, so here's Aleph through Tav, Aleph through Tav, Aleph through Tav in red letters. This is a paleo font. And for the record, this exact font in this exact style isn't found anywhere else. It's kind of an artistic license of creation that I did. But what I did is I found actual paleo letter shapes, paleo meaning ancient, before modern record, actual letter shapes of these letters, but they may have come from different artifacts. But I tried to find the most elegant shape, which is to say the simplest shape, where you can, if you look close at the shape of the letter, you'll see the meaning of the letter in its shape. For example, this letter Bet is a house, it's to be incorporated into a body, to take a plan and to materialize it. This little picture down here, it's kind of like this embryonic newt or a tadpole or the beginnings of a body. So to Bet is to incorporate into a body, to take a plan and to embody the plan. is the meaning of the letter bet. And so the way this letter bet is drawn is kind of like an embryonic shape. But it's also, as this picture here, if you look at the floor plan of a tent, now a lot of tents these days, at least here in America, are just one room. But apparently a Bedouin tent from the Middle East, you don't just have one room open to the public, you have a room, but then there's a fold in it, which is the private sector. So here you have the public entrance, you go around the corner, and there's the private section. It's like, well, that makes sense. But that's the shape of the letter bet. It's the shape of a tent. And you can come out of the private section into the public section, which is that dotted line with the arrow, kind of, it's showing a path of embarking. So you start where it's closed in, and then you open up to the public. Interestingly enough, to look at now pattern correlations, if you look where he said, and you shall regard these matters, write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. It's like, well, it's starting at the personal, and then it's extending out. And think of when you lie down and when you rise up. When you lie down, you're going into your personal space. When you rise up, you're going public. And if you look at everything in that sequence of that commandment, it's the personal zone, and then it's the public zone. And so there's this two aspects. And this is a matter of looking at the patterns that are embedded in the words. And if you say, well, there's this personal and then there's the public, it's like the letter bet where you've got the brain forms first and then the body extends and the spinal cord and the arms and legs. And it's like the same concepts are embedded in the form. And then if you look at the letter Gimel, for example, it's shaped like a boomerang. And the boomerang is the tool or the weapon that goes out and then comes back. It's also shaped like the head and the neck of a camel. And so a camel, when it eats something and what it swallows goes down its throat, is a picture of to transport. Gimel means to transport. It's where we get the word camel. The letter G, Gimel, and C, the third letter, is the same letter. So a camel is that which you load up and it takes the stuff over to here. That is gimmeling. But it also turns around and comes back. Just a truck on the freeway is a picture of gimmeling. In fact, if you look over here and then look over there, and then you might look back, your head is gimmeling just because it's looking from here to there. So the question is, what is gimel? Is it a camel? That which goes from here to there? It's also the road on which the camel walks. It's also the concept or the fact that you want to ship something. FedEx, for example, you could call them gimmelers because that's their business of transporting back and forth and shipping this and that and shipping objects. So if you look at the shape of the letter Gimel in the paleo, it's the head and the neck, the throat, the conduit, the pipe. You pour something in this end of the pipe and it flows out and comes out that end of the pipe. Even though you're not thinking, well, it has to go back, the concept of transportation is a Gimel concept. So in the paleo, it's just the simple little line drawing of a head and a neck. In fact, on the board here, that's simple. If it was simply a line, you wouldn't quite know what that was. So what I'm showing you is that the simple, most elegant, which is to say streamlined, unadorned, unencumbered, the simplest, most elegant shape of the meaning behind every letter is in the paleo. There's the Gimel. In the bet, now if you look at an Aleph, for example, there's this concept of, say if you're the Ein Sof, the one without limit. How do you establish a limit? You could say, okay, I'm going to establish a limit by making a point, just a point. And it's like, what do you do with that? It's hard to define, but if you say, okay, listen, I'm going to establish a limit to make something clear. I'm going to draw a line, and so now we have something on this side of the line and something on that side of the line. But where's the line going to start? It's got to start somewhere. So now you get into this mathematical geometry concept where you start with a point and draw a line. But you still haven't defined a space. It's just a line. Okay, it's a reference. But if you really want to make a zone, how would you do that? Well, if you do another line, it's like, where does that line end? I mean, it could go off into infinity, and you could say, well, it's like this pi section of infinity, you still haven't defined it. Well, draw another line, Now you've defined a space. And 3 lines determine a plane in geometry. The simplest way to define one area as identified exclusively from all other areas is 3 lines. That's basic geometry. That's the Aleph. Now it also happens to look like, you might say a goat's head or an ox head, which is to say, the ox, they set in motion to plow the field. But it's basically that shape, which is to say, if you are bowling, you're the one with the bowling ball, and you go, okay, I'm gonna set up for myself some pins out there in the distance. That's the target. That's my agenda to accomplish knocking down those pins. I'm just going to make a game for myself, so I'm going to make a round ball, a bowling ball, and set up an alley. And I'm going to go through all this effort just so I can see if I can roll this bowling ball down the alley. So you make for yourself this alley, you make for yourself the bowl, you set yourself the agenda to have a target in the distance, these 10 pins, and you get this ball and you say, okay, I'm now going to determine, I'm the authority, I'm the one in control, and I'm going to take this ball and I'm going to determine its direction and its speed, its velocity, and I'm going to shove it down there. You are the governing authority of that thing that you now set in motion to accomplish a task. The governing authority is the lamed, which is kind of like the opposite shape of the gimel, if you'll notice. But the lamed is almost like the hook of your hand, but it's also like a shepherd's staff, which is to say, it's got the pokey end and it's got the pulling end. So to poke, to pull, to provoke, to induce, to teach, to learn, to cause, to incite, these are all words of lamed. That's what lamed means. But you being the lamed, the authority that sets this bowling ball in motion, the bowling ball now is not of its own volition. It's got the inertia, you might say, of what you put into it to go down and cause that. That's the picture of the Aleph also. The Aleph is like the bowling ball or the ox that you, the lamed, sets in motion to run down and knock out the goal. And the thing at the end of the goal is the Tav, which is the sign at the end. So the Aleph becoming Tav is Aleph and Tav. I just write it in shorthand, you might say, is in paleo Aleph Tav. So you'll see on the chart this symbol, which is Aleph connected to Tav, which is down here on the in some pictures and some other places. Anyway, the point about that is we're running, just so you know, we've got about 8 minutes here. Aleph connected to Tav, Aleph Vav Tav, because Vav is a connector, which is a nail or a hook, or like a bridge. So here, if you look under the Vav, there's a man, and there's a nail, and there's a picture of like this bridge, and the hay is something it points to. So here, we're pointing to the bridge. But Aleph connected to Vav actually spells a word. It's pronounced, Aleph is basically the silent letter. You have to plug another vowel onto it, but Aleph itself is silent, like the architect. Do you hear the voice of who designed this building? No, but you can see the building that he designed. Yahweh is a little different in that he did give his people his voice on Mount Sinai. They said, we don't want to hear your voice again. You speak to Moses and he'll tell us. And he said, well, I'll also give you my words. You can read my words. But they didn't want to hear his voice. Aleph is silent, the one silent letter. But the word Aleph Vav Tav, Vav is pronounced, if you look back here, F-O-U-V-W. That's the way, it's in the position of F, but it's not pronounced as an F. If you look over here on a pay, for what it's worth, it's P and a PH. That's actually the F sound. But the Vav is actually pronounced as an O. Oath. In English, O-A-T-H. It's pronounced oath. Oath. Also, the word Aleph Vav Tav means a sign, a symbol, a signal. Getting somebody's attention so that you can tell them what you have sworn to. That's the word oath. Now, a very interesting thing. this particular book, which I've encouraged people to get, and Jamie has something to say about this, we're getting these at a good rate. They ran out of publication. We went and talked to the Carta Jerusalem, the publishers were in Israel. They're publishing new ones. There's a whole new slew of them coming out. But if you look at the word for oath, Aleph Vav Tav, in this dictionary, comprehensive etymological dictionary of the Hebrew language for readers of English by Ernest Klein, published by Carta Jerusalem, the word oath means a letter of the alphabet. Every letter of the alphabet is the Creator's oath of saying, what I have planned, Aleph, will be accomplished, Tav. My oath is that when I say it, you can count on it that it'll be done. The words that came out of my mouth will not come back to me void. They will accomplish everything I said would happen. I'm quoting scripture here. These are things that the Creator himself said. The other interesting thing about that is that if you take the word for truth, which is Aleph Mem Tav, the word Mem, if you read down here at the letter Mem, it basically means when you have planted a seed into the environment where it will nurture and grow, like putting a seed in the soil, or a woman who's pregnant, or in a womb of water, that's Mem. It incubates. It has a period of gestation, of development, until at noon is born. But the period of it going from planting the seed until it's accomplished, you might say born or noon, noon would be the Tav event, the ending objective event of planting that seed. Aleph Mem Tav, Mem like water, like a tsunami. Say there's an earthquake, an event, a causing event. There's an earthquake over here, and under the water there's this swell coming, and all of a sudden, there you got the tsunami. That's Aleph Mem Tav. That's the word truth, emet. The truth is, when 80 times or so in the book of Ezekiel, Yahweh said, such and such is going to happen, then they will know that I am the Lord. That's what it says in English. But it doesn't say I am the Lord. What it says is Ki, which is Kaf Yod, Ani, Aleph Nun Yod, Yod He Vav He, Yod He Vav He, which is these words here, Ani Yahweh. On this chart, that's another thing, but the point is, the word Ani means I am. Aleph, I have set it about. Nun, I will make it birthed. And Yod, I'm the guy. I'm the creator. I'm the one doing it. So if you look at these letters for Yod, here, it says, I make, I do, I cause, I aim, I destroy, I am, the working hand. That's what the Yod is. To say, they will all know me, you might think, well, me, should that be Ani? But the word, when he says, Jeremiah 31:33, and we'll say this, we'll write at the end of the tape, no more, this is a future event, hasn't happened yet, so it's we know, no more will any man say to his brother or his friend, you should know Yahweh, know Elohim, for they will all know me, from the least of these unto the greatest. Who's the least? Who's the greatest? Do we all know him? Who's him? He said, they will all know O-T. They will all know O-T. They will all know my oath. They will all know my letters of the alphabet, from the least of these to the greatest. The word for least of these is is spelled Kuf Tet, which is our letters QT, which is they're little cutie things. These letters of the alphabet have always been considered cute little things that you teach the children. They will become Gedolim, which is to say, incredible towers. The Migdal David there in Jerusalem is this Tower of David. It wasn't built by him, it was a Saracen structure, but nevertheless, it's like this fortress tower. What is he saying? They will all know me, from the children to the scholars? Or is he saying they will all know my oath by the letter of the alphabet, and they will become known because they're not any longer going to be considered cute little things that you teach children, though they are that, but they are these incredible things, these giants of the Ein Sof, revealing his own face as an oath. I said it, I will accomplish it, I will do it, I will manifest myself and make it known. And Yeshua himself was the embodiment of every one of these letters, the Torah in the flesh. that we could see the character and nature of the creator of the universe walking out his ways and principles as a human being so that we could do likewise, exactly, nothing missing, exactly in his footsteps, and so be indeed his children, his bet nun, his bone, his structure, the manifestation in physicality of him, the unlimited one, who isn't going to speak except through us.